Hi guys, day two, welcome. I have a wonderful guest with me here today, Chris Brummer. He is the CEO and founder of a company called Bluprynt, which is a crypto compliance company. And now, as we all know, crypto compliance is kind of a big deal these days, I'm told. So
there's some rules and stuff that are developed here.
Some kind of rules of the road. We only have a few minutes, but I want you to tell me how you got started with Bluprynt and what was sort of your story, how you got into crypto and fintech, really.
Yeah, well, the fintech story is a little bit longer because I'm also a law professor over at Georgetown, and so I was actually doing fintech before it was called fintech.
Right.
But I was thinking about things like crowdfunding and capital formation and what are the rules and frankly, what's the technology environment supposed to look like in order to enable entrepreneurial innovation. And here this interesting thing called crypto comes along, and I see a lot of sort of a continuation of a longer story as to how do you make markets work better, and I just sort of fell in love with the topic. Now, my company was founded off of that same sort of intuition that if you really want crypto to thrive, and if you're thinking about regulation and the like, that regulatory environment has to have the right rules.
Yep.
I'm a law professor. But it also has to have the right technology stack. Many of our rules are premised off of 1933, and I tell my students all the time,
90 years old, right?
Almost 90 years old. 90 years, yeah, almost as old as I am.
Yeah.
It's premised upon pieces of paper, like literally pieces of paper, like chopping trees down and putting paper into boxes and sending them off as documents. And that doesn't seem exactly sort of fit for purpose when you're talking about 24/7 markets that are operating on distributed ledgers. Mm-hmm. And so the company basically tries to do two things. Number one, we try to make it easier for startups and entrepreneurs to comply with rules digitally and in a crypto-native way around the world. And then secondly, even for the regulators, because we have to have them involved, how can you get them to operate in a more crypto-native way? So we have everything from token launchers and entrepreneurs who use our services to central banks. Which makes it a very, very interesting business. And it's really geared towards enabling entrepreneurs to focus on what they need to do while complying in ways that are as inexpensive and frictionless and native to a digital crypto asset environment as possible.
Mm-hmm. Now, you've been dealing with regulators for a number of years.
Many years.
You're a Georgetown law professor.
Live in D.C.
So you've been in the Washington area. You run a thing called FinTech Week. So
yes.
you've dealt with everybody from Gary Gensler to now Paul Atkins. Hester Peirce, you know very well. You were at one of the SEC roundtables recently.
Yes.
And can you just tell the audience a little bit about what that was like? Because we all know the SEC here, at least everybody in this room knows the SEC as the Gary Gensler SEC, the bad guy SEC.
It's no longer that SEC.
It's no longer that?
No. It really is pretty remarkable. So the SEC Crypto Task Force sort of invites industry specialists and others to share their views with SEC staff and with other people and participants in Washington, D.C. to give their thoughts about, like, well, how can we make the rules work? How do you modernize them? And how do you make the ecosystem more effective? Now, going to the so I was on the very first roundtable, which was a privilege. And
was that the one talking about how do we fit crypto into securities laws? Or
that is correct, which is all we think about. It's like,
what is a security?
Qu'est-ce que c'est? Like how do you figure that out? And the environment wasn't too different from this. I mean, it was like the desire and interest and enthusiasm where people were just sort of happy to be in the room. It was a little bit weird because people were so excited about something that was in a way very normal, right? Getting some people on stage to have a round table to hammer out different issues of securities law and how it could impact, and not everybody agreed on everything. There were like very different opinions, but just to get that over in a regulatory agency isn't or shouldn't be a big deal.
Yeah.
But the fact that it was happening after the last 4 years made it a very big deal. and there was a lot of enthusiasm to that, and it was something I noticed.
Yeah. Tell us about FinTech Week. That's coming up in October, I believe. That's a event that you host. You've hosted for 8 years now.
Yeah.
It's kind of become a big deal in DC.
It has become a big deal. So like among the many things, one of the former, and I think he'll also be speaking, Christian Carlo, the former CFTC chair, had years ago, when it came to fintech, said, hey, can you create a safe environment for us to talk about financial technology? Little did I know that that was really important. And this was over 8 years ago. And it started off in a small sort of room over in Georgetown. And now it's every day, IMF World Bank meeting weeks. You're all invited. We do it for free. And we have everyone.
Brad goes, right? Brad Garlinghouse has gone.
Brad comes every year. Yeah,
Okay.
he was the earliest truly sort of big crypto personality to show up, and since then everybody has come. I mean, he kind of opens up a number of doors when he arrives on the scene. And this year, we have the IMF and the World Bank because we're in Washington D.C. Other CEOs of major companies. AWS is hosting us at their headquarters this year, and the CNBCs and the Bloombergs and others. They all come to sort of stream it, and it's a little bit
The
of
Crypto in Americas.
And the Crypto in Americas, which we have now made sure will happen, and it's really just an opportunity to learn more. I do it every year as a bit of a public service. I kind of like, I'm a pretty mission-oriented kind of person, and I think it's important for people to understand what they're dealing with in order to make the most of it. Mm-hmm. And we do this for the week, and the ambassadors get involved, and all the international organizations. It's a pretty big deal. So October 14th through the 17th, and
awesome.
And just that mission thing is pretty important. We try to enable entrepreneurs and others as well to participate. For any of the entrepreneurs, if any of the entrepreneurs are dealing with compliance issues, I told some of the folks in the back that we're allowing folks to access a couple of things on the Bluprynt website. In particular, if you're complying with MiCA, we're opening up sort of a little checker so that you guys, for free, to make sure you guys stay compliant over in the EU, if you want to check that out.
Now, is this for businesses or for individuals as well?
This is for individuals. So basically, if you're an individual and you're operating in the European Union, there's something called MiCA. Right now we're working, with the Clarity Act and the Genius Act here in the United States to sort of figure out what the right way and what the right approach is to stay compliant. The Europeans started that earlier than the United States did. And one of the requirements is like a white paper, like you have to have disclosures. And so we're helping people to sort of TurboTax that function. Mm-hmm. And we have other kinds of things where you can put that data on a blockchain and to really integrate that compliance to automate it so that you don't have to worry about it anymore. But I called my team last night. I said, I'm going to be seeing Brad Garlinghouse. So let's
Up
like
next, ladies and gentlemen, by the way.
Exactly. So can you guys work overnight a little bit to sort of put a little sticker or a tag on the website for any of the XRP engineers or entrepreneurs if they're working in Europe to just, if they have their white paper because some of the grace periods are ending, if they just want to do a quick check to make sure that that their white papers are complete. They can just go and check it out. But I think that it's that kind of stuff, to help to enable young entrepreneurs, and they could be issuers. Obviously, they could be a stablecoin issuer, they could be a young entrepreneur who's coming up with a new technology. But we have to figure out a way to not just get the rules right substantively, but we have to really figure out a way to make sure that the technology stack, as I said, is kind of fit for purpose. And if you do that, you can encourage much more transparency, more building, add to the velocity of innovation. And it really should be a partnership, in my mind, between the regulatory sector and the private sector and nerdy law professors. And if you get that mix the right way, you can really make some magic happen.
Here in the US, just quickly, last question. While we're waiting for regulatory clarity, while we're waiting for legislation to be passed in Congress, what can XRP builders and entrepreneurs here in the US do to kind of protect themselves, stay compliant, until we have those solidified rules of the road?
Yeah, that's a really hard question.
Maybe not a
because-
question for no time left, but.
Yeah, it's like you have 2 seconds. What? I think it's very important to make sure that you are plugged into information sources that you can rely on. And I've pushed, frankly, over the years, the regulators to add more clarity to what they do, not just in terms of giving instruction, but to translate those instructions into a plain English format that the entrepreneurs themselves can understand. And
Right.
I think that even at some of the regulatory agencies like the SEC, and if you look at some of these websites, you are seeing some changes and more engagement in a different language. Just keep plugged into some of those agencies and see what's up next.
Cool.
Yep.
Right, well, I'm going to remove myself from stage, and someone else who is much cooler than I am is going to come on and take my place. That's Brad Garlinghouse, everybody.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Mr. Brad Garlinghouse, Ripple CEO.
Me off over here? Yeah.
We're here.